The world is shaping up for a revolution in aviation innovation. In the UK, businesses are already creating new, innovative, greener air transport solutions designed to offer more choice and reduce our carbon footprint. The Future Flight Challenge from UK Research and Innovation aims to create the aviation system of the future, allowing us to improve transport links between regions and in remote areas to connect people to education, jobs and healthcare. Our £125 million investment will allow the UK to build, use and export new transport technologies and be at the forefront of aviation innovation. We're bringing together industry experts to carry out research, development and demonstrations to solve mobility challenges in the UK. By encouraging innovators from a wide variety of sectors to work together, the projects we fund will help shape novel aviation approaches to enable the safe operation of radically new aircraft. Using drones to offer alternative ways of delivering goods and services, both in highly populated and remote areas. Carrying out offshore maintenance and surveillance for the renewable energy sector. The delivery of medical supplies. Surveying buildings after a fire or collapse to reduce the risk to human life. Or post-incident filming for evidence gathering. Using new and sustainable fuel sources to lower carbon emissions from advanced air mobility vehicles and electric or hybrid aircraft to help address the mobility and congestion problems in urban areas and improve travel connections for rural communities where the development of ground infrastructure is difficult. These new modes of air transport will combine in a coordinated airspace where scheduled and on-demand flights work together to move people, goods and services. To enable widespread safe use of autonomous and electric air vehicles, Future Flight will bring together advanced technologies with control and regulation, physical and digital infrastructure systems, and new operating models. This new environment will be a catalyst for businesses to invest in the UK as we shape the global future of aviation and create a truly integrated aviation system. With a truly all-inclusive approach, Future Flight is transformational and will change our lives.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for rejoining the series Future Flight Fridays. Today, we've got a very exciting webinar for you talking through the Future Flight Roadmap. So I'm going to talk you through the agenda before we kick off with our speakers. I'm going to give you a brief welcome and an outline of the objectives of this webinar series. We will then have the Future Flight Roadmap presentation from Carissa Khan, Innovation Lead at the Future Flight Challenge, and Ian Brumbury, Consultant at the Future Flight Challenge. We'll then open for a panel discussion, which will include the two presenters listed above, as well as Fern Elsdon-Baker, the Social Science Research Director for the Future Flight Challenge, Richard Parker, CEO at Altitude Angel, Eduardo Dominguez-Perta at Vertical Aerospace, and he is their CCO. We will then have a Q&A for 15 minutes and a quick wrap up with closing remarks before letting you all go and have some much needed lunch. So without further ado, I will go through the aims of this webinar series. So we're here today to support the exchange of knowledge, gain new insights into the Future Flight Challenge and particularly Phase 3, maintain a dialogue around the Future Flight Challenge, hopefully support you in building some new connections and find technology or services to help you with your ideas or potentially a Phase 3 project. So thank you very much for joining us today, and I will hand over to Carissa Khan to read the Future Flight Roadmap. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. So today we're going to share with you the vision for the future aviation system in 2030 and the roadmap that sets out the sequence of principal milestones that will need to be achieved to not only realize this vision, but also position the UK as a global leader in the third aviation revolution. Earlier this month, I presented the 2024 vision and ambition for Future Flight in the UK, which is the timeframe in which the Future Flight Challenge sits. But today, we're going to present the wider roadmap that goes beyond 2024. So next slide, please. Thank you. So today, I'll set out the why are we doing this? Why is the UK pursuing future flight technologies? what are the market opportunities? What are the trends and drivers? I'll set out the 2030 vision for consumers. So what would the consumer see in 2030? The industry vision for 2030, what would the integrated aviation ecosystem look like in 2030? I'll also highlight some example use cases to paint a picture of what that 2030 vision would look like, just stitching together that consumer vision and industry vision. And then we'd share a summary of the wider roadmap. Now, I'm aware some of you who have joined the Vision and Ambition event earlier this month, we went through some of this, but this really sets out the foundation on which we built the roadmap. So we'll start there. So if I can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So, sorry, I'm really struggling to see that slide. Sorry. So we set out to first understand why we're doing this. So what are the trends and the drivers? And we recognize that some of these are threats, some of these are opportunities. But why are we doing this? Well, global trends and drivers that are impacting the development of the future aviation system. One, convenience. So we do have a culture of hyper convenience. We want things fast. We want fast delivery. We want shorter journey times. We want greater accessibility. We want greater connectivity. We have sustainability driving future flight as well. There's increased focus in this area with net zero targets and net zero carbon targets by 2050. We also have the public demand for a modernized transport system. And like I've said, greater accessibility and connectivity. We also have the emergence of disruptive technologies that is driving innovation in this space. We also have international competition, strong international competition, where other nations are chasing this massive market. So all of this is driving us in the UK to develop future aviation technologies. And we also see threats and opportunities. So one threat being, in order to do this, we need regulations, but this can be slow and it can be conflicting. However, the UK has independent control over airspace and aircraft regulations that can give us the opportunity for rapid progression. We also have a changing energy system infrastructure and increasing electrification across transport that we can take advantage of. We also see increasing affordability of new transport technologies. We also have new entrants to the market and that is disrupting traditional business models. That can be an opportunity. We also have fast evolving technology. However, this can be risky in terms of private investment. So we have a mixture of threats and opportunities. But what we want to do is make sure that we're taking advantage of the opportunities. So I'll move to the next slide, please. Okay. So we set out the consumer vision for 2030. So what would the consumer see in 2030? What are the benefits for the consumer? We put the consumer at the center, and that's where we started. For the purpose of this study, we recognize that the definition of these different classes of air vehicles isn't well defined, and because it's an emerging industry, there's a lot of overlap. However, the way we've defined these classes of vehicles are drones as being unpiloted, non-passenger carrying vehicles, varying in size from small to large, advanced air mobility vehicles, eVTOLs, so electric vertical and takeoff landing vehicles that provide shorter journeys for up to 10 people. Now we're aware that there are air vehicle developers that are looking at up to 7 people, but here we're setting the vision for 2030, so we're leaving some room for innovation. And regional air mobility, which is your 10+ person electric, hydrogen or hybrid conventional takeoff and landing aircraft that provides short to medium range hops between different locations. So drones. What are the benefits that drones would bring to the consumers? We see faster deliveries. So we have distribution and delivery services that are rapid and convenient and also within easy reach of the consumer. We see supporting services where drones can support emergency services and perform complex inspections and operations, etc., that reduce the risk to personnel. We see increased acceptability where drone operations are quiet, they are safe, and they are acceptable as part of day-to-day life. For advanced air mobility and regional air mobility, we see these classes of vehicles bringing benefits to the consumer in terms of reduced congestion. So where we have efficient use of airspace resources and reducing ground congestion as we move things from the ground to the air, increased consumer choice. As a consumer, we want to have greater options in the way we travel, and allowing us to choose between cost and environmental efficiency. Reduce journey times. We all want to get, like I said, this culture of hyper convenience. We all want to get to our destination faster. Journey convenience, where services are available, they're on demand, and having reduced journey times as well. Improved affordability, of course. Seamless journeys, where we have existing transport integrated as part of this seamless end-to-end transport network, which includes ticketing as well. And improved connectivity, where we have rural and traditionally disconnected regions form part of this highly distributed aviation system. And we see all of these classes of vehicles bringing increased sustainability, improved accessibility, and of course, benefits to the UK economy, where there's a predicted increase in GDP of 1.8% and 628,000 jobs, and I'm sure will increase, supported by 2030. So I'll move to the next slide, please. Thanks. Okay, so this is where we set out, well, in order to achieve that consumer vision, what does the future aviation system or future aviation environment, that ecosystem, how will it operate in 2030? What needs to happen by 2030? And this helps inform our stakeholders in this ecosystem. What are the things they need to be working towards? So by 2030, the industry vision is to have services that are predictable. They are planned and simulated effectively and have accurate forecasting. Sustainable operations with electric and hydrogen-based operations, minimizing the environmental impact. It is unified so that we have aircraft seamlessly transitioning between different airspace classes. It is dynamic, so the airspace is used in a dynamic way for mixed traffic as well as increasing volumes of traffic. It is interoperable, and this is really important, having that global interoperability built into all the services as a standard. It is flexible, so services are available on demand or scheduled, and provides and enables mobility as a service. It is commercially viable, so operations are regular and financially viable. It is integrated, so we have novel and traditional aircraft types, different classes of vehicles integrated and operating within the same airspace. It is inclusive, a very important point, where we have services designed with the human at the center and increasing mobility for everyone. It is scalable, so the system is able to scale in order to support these increasing numbers of new movements and new classes of their vehicles. It is distributed, so we have small and regional airports as feature as part of this highly distributed aviation system, where the consumer can be in close proximity to an airport. It is simple, so there is reduced complexity through system consolidation, so ensuring that the ecosystem and the environment is simplified as much as possible. It is regulated, not something innovators like to hear because they usually associate this with red tape, but ensuring that we have a regulatory environment that enables this industry to flourish. It is equitable, so operators have fair access to the network for services. Also, it is safe, very important. So safety risks on the ground and in the air are mitigated. It is secure. So infrastructure and vehicles are protected from physical and digital threats, including cyber threats. It is harmonized. So day-to-day operations are part of this socially accepted ecosystem, and it is seamless. So airports and existing transport infrastructure are all integrated as part of this seamless end-to-end transport network. I'll move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So this is where we set out some example use cases, and there are many use cases. However, the purpose of this is for us to just stitch that consumer vision and that industry vision together and paint a picture of what 2030 can look like. What would be the norm? What would be every day in terms of these future aviation technologies? What benefits would it provide, and how will it operate? So some examples are having intertown transit. So there is access to convenient air travel for mobility between towns and cities. Passengers can access a scheduled electric or hydrogen powered aircraft on high density routes. And the air travel element connects seamlessly with other forms of transport where users can use a single ticket, and you can have that curb to curb mobility system. Another use case or another example is having rural and disconnected transit, where air taxis are used for transit between rural and traditionally disconnected areas as part of this highly distributed aviation system, and it can be scheduled or on demand. And we think of the greater benefits that would bring in terms of accessibility, leveling up, etc. Drone deliveries for retail organizations are used to provide this on-demand last mile delivery for consumers within easy reach of the consumers, utilizing a network of drones with BVLOS capabilities. Cargo delivery, so cargo is transported as part of this operational service across the UK between distribution centres by fleets of zero-emission electric conventional takeoff and landing aircraft and autonomous drones as well. Drones being used for maintenance and inspection. So we have rapidly deployed and high endurance autonomous drones that carry out these operations that reduce risk to personnel because of the complex operations and environments. Intercity journeys, so passengers have access to autonomous eVTOLs for mobility between urban locations as an additional mode of transport. Emergency services being provided by rapidly deployable drone operations for first response scenarios in the case of road traffic accidents, search and rescue, etc. And then rapid airport transfer. So we have the case where passengers have access to on-demand air mobility to provide transit between their homes and nearby airports, as well as between hub airports and local airports for onward transfer, and between airports and high volume cities and towns. So this just paints a picture of what do we see 2030 looking like in terms of future flight technologies. I'll move on to the next slide, please. So then in developing this roadmap, we consolidated inputs from across industry, academia, just diverse stakeholders who helped us shape this roadmap. And we identified, well, what are the priority areas? Now there were lots of areas identified, but our delegates pulled out and identified key priority areas for us to focus on in order to deliver future flight in the UK. And we categorized these into 3 themes. One, infrastructure, where we cover physical, digital, airspace, and energy infrastructure. And this incorporates communications, surveillance, vertiports, airport infrastructure, local town and city infrastructure, airspace modernization, UTM technology, and ATM integration. We also pulled out air vehicle capabilities as being a key theme. And the areas that this covers include the air vehicle powertrain, autonomous navigation, detect and avoid technology, BVLOS navigation, electronic conspicuity, and overall vehicle development. We also pulled out a theme of regulatory and what we called knowledge-based infrastructure, which encapsulates standards, insurance, social science, skills, training, intellectual property, etc. And the priority areas to focus with this theme include developing societal trust and acceptance, future flight skills and training, and intellectual property. We then use these priority areas to build the roadmap, and I'll invite Ian, who will share the process that we took on. Thanks, Ian.
Thanks, Carissa. So I'm just going to talk very briefly about how we established the detail of the roadmap now. So we've driven this detail down from down to the specific actions and milestones that form the roadmap from the vision and the use case work that Carissa's just talked through now. So as Chris has set out, we started with these priority areas. That was deemed the key areas of the roadmap to focus on. And we've looked at those as a core part of our roadmap, and you'll see those threaded throughout now across the areas of infrastructure, air vehicle capabilities, and this knowledge-based infrastructure. So with each of those areas, we've looked into them in detail, and we've come up with where we think those roadmap areas are supporting the use cases. And again, don't read too much into detail here. You can see this in the published documents, but you'll see that the why we're doing this is supported by those use cases that help us to understand where those map to those individual use cases. And then we've taken the industry vision, and it's worth saying the industry vision is mapped to international frameworks of ambition, such as the ICAO Global Air Navigation Plan, where we can help understand what the rest of industry is looking at. And we've mapped the industry vision to those, and then to our roadmap areas as well. So you can see which of our roadmap areas are really key to those, to the industry vision, and that helps us to set out what we are trying to achieve with those areas. And then finally, on the right-hand side of this picture at the bottom, you'll see the detail of this matrix, which really sets out the individual details of the actions and the roadmaps. And I'll save you from going through the actual individual items there, but you'll see we've come up with, in fact, there's over 160 actions now in total, and milestones that feature on our roadmap that map down to individual roadmap areas and specific actions and milestones, which each map to a time frame within our roadmap, action owners, and a real understanding about the risks and how those knit together to form the bigger picture of the roadmap. That's all the detail of the roadmap. And on the next slide, you'll see that it comes up to a really high level now. So we've gone right down into detail, and now we can come back up and look at how that feels overall as a time frame. So those 160 actions and milestones come back up, and you can talk about them in now across these 5 different phases. So we have a phase that starts now. We're in a present day phase of development. Services are being developed and simulated, and we're looking at unlocking these paths to certification and social acceptance of new services. By 2024, we see a key phase being demonstration, and this aligns with, as you'll understand, the Future Flight Challenge Phase 3, where we're looking to unlock key demonstrations within this time frame, where we can demonstrate them real-world, large-scale services integrating across different types of activities with strong social benefits demonstrated and really strong economic value propositions. As we progress to 2026, you'll see that now services are becoming much more kind of commercially viable. We'll see new investment coming into the industry as this commercial viability matures, and that ultimately brings down production costs as well and allows the industry to progress to the next phase in 2028 as it scales up. And we see both geographical distribution of services, but also more cost-effective manufacturing of underlying services as well. And ultimately towards 2030, where we see a fully integrated and mobility as a service type operation, where as a user you can fully use all of the services from a single ticket across all different types of transport networks, and it's available for all users. Next slide, please. Well, then what I'll do now, I'll just highlight a few key areas from the roadmap. So again, please don't read into any detail here. I'm just going to pull up a few threads from this. You'll see the next slides talk through the detail of both the infrastructure, the air vehicle capabilities, and the knowledge-based infrastructure areas of the roadmap. And if you go to the next slide, you'll just see we've highlighted a few of the areas in this. I appreciate you may not be able to see the detail here, where we just pull out a few threads. So this is a thread around energy infrastructure. And there's a few items to just make note of here. So for example, the energy infrastructure will develop from where it is today, which is we're seeing rapid development in battery and supply chain technology across both aviation and the wider industry, particularly in the car industry. We see development in alternative fuels driven by new initiatives such as the Future Flight Challenge, but also much wider initiatives around low carbon, which are driving new investment into this area. And that is fostering a culture of research and development in this area for both infrastructure and capabilities itself in the energy infrastructure. As we progress through now, just to highlight a few of the milestones, we see in 2024, the new interoperable charging infrastructure will come into place. Again, key thing being that we are driving towards an interoperable energy here that's usable across both lots of different industries and within the aviation industry. And then towards 2026, we see modernisation of small airfields, hydrogen coming on board, supporting existing and supporting expanding regional air mobility operations. And then to 2028, where we see the competitive market for energy solutions becoming much more prevalent at this point, allowing an industry to scale low carbon energy solutions. So again, I'll just pulling out threads here. I'm not going to cover the detail of the roadmap. That's all available, published through the Future Flight Challenge website. On the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about the airspace thread. So airspace is another type of infrastructure that we've obviously considered in detail, and we can talk a little bit about this further on as well. We see that today. We see obviously existing new UTM capabilities, so we mean uncrewed traffic management capabilities here, building on established air traffic management systems. And we see starting of concepts of operations coming on board as well for new types of services. Towards 2024, we see new public consultations coming on board for new types of airspace. We see future airspace changes being agreed to support higher volume operations. Towards 2026, we see that higher volume operations are being established now through strategic and tactical deconfliction and planning. As we progress further online, we'll see new airspace categories or new airspace types coming on board towards 2028, allowing large-scale operations. And ultimately towards 2030, where we start to see a fully integrated traditional air traffic management and unpiloted traffic management services coming on board, with interoperability both within the UK and overseas, allowing for high volume operations with multiple classes of airspace across multiple classes of vehicles across different classes of airspace. On the next one, I'll talk very briefly about the mobility as a service thread. And again, I'll only pull out a few key things here from the roadmap. Right now, we're seeing development towards standards around single tickets, and solutions such as living labs coming on board, which show a slightly multimodal transport system being demonstrated. As we progress through, we'd see a number of those come through to integrate with existing airfields that are being modernised to support eVTOL operations, allowing a highly distributed aviation network to be established. That's being then towards 2030, we see that becoming much more integrated with the rest of the transport network, and ultimately progressing to a situation which I mentioned earlier, where we expect the mobile on-demand booking solutions for advanced air mobility, regional air mobility, and existing transport to all be integrated and available to everybody to use as a wide transport system. On the next slide, I'll just talk briefly then about the air vehicle capabilities. And I'll pull out one thread on this, which is around autonomy. If you click onto the next slide, this will just highlight a couple of the key points around the automation thread within air vehicle capabilities. So right now we see that there are trials of real-world remotely piloted drones with autonomous capabilities being built in, and towards 2024 we'd expect that to be some much more level of automation being built into both drone operations and advanced air mobilities. So for example, we could expect to see some form of highly automated capability built into advanced air mobility vehicles. The certification we expect to take a bit longer, so towards 2026 we expect this is a phase where perhaps autonomous navigation will be certified for use in drone operations, particularly within other classes of vehicles, or there's other complexities in the airspace involved. And then towards 2028 and 2030, we start to see autonomous capabilities fit within advanced air mobility vehicles, perhaps with a pilot on board initially, as you'd expect, moving towards a full autonomous capabilities later on in the roadmap. The air vehicle capability is obviously a big area of the roadmap. And I'm just pulling out little threads here to talk through examples. On the next slide, I'll do the same with the knowledge-based infrastructure. So within the knowledge-based infrastructure, you'd expect there's a couple of threads I'll pull out. On the next slide, I'll just pull out a thread around regulation. So the regulatory environment is obviously complex, as we're all aware, and we see this evolving over time. again, I'll pull out just a couple of examples of where we see key milestones over the next few years. The regulatory sandbox has been established already, so it's a great environment to support innovation within the UK, and rather unique for that, where our regulators are supporting real innovation in this area. And we see that enabling an acceleration of development, certification and approval within use of, particularly around trials. As we progress further down the roadmap, we would expect to see that those existing regulations will be built upon, allowing us to use new regulations or new built upon regulations to as a path to certification for new types of air vehicles and new types of capabilities. We'd expect the UK to become fully compliant with international standards and certainly be driving some of those standards forward. And as we go forward as well toward 2030, we'd expect that the UK is a leading knowledge-based infrastructure in this area, and that underpins this safe and inclusive future flight products and services that are being developed. And then finally, I'll just pull out a final thread on social license on the final slide. And Fern's going to talk about this in a little bit more detail, as you'd expect, but there are many activities both occurring now and planned within the roadmap that will aid the social license that comes alongside the Future Flight Challenge. They include both the consultation that we'd expect to occur on the use of autonomous technologies, particularly in the UK. We'd expect that to go towards 2024 when potentially new legislation will come in, or certainly built upon legislation for things like acceptable levels of noise and privacy, where we see an increased use of drones in particular in this area. Ultimately, 2024 is a key area for us because of the amount of demonstrations we'd expect to be occurring in this period. And we really want, as we've talked about, to see those demonstrations prove positive and safe use cases that help to build some of that public trust and some of the draw from the public to these new types of services. As we go through the phase of the roadmap, we expect to see the increased volume of operations build further public trust as it becomes more of a normal activities. And then in 2028, as we see the distributed system extend, we'd expect to see the new economic ties between areas that were potentially traditionally disconnected actually build some additional public trust because they form part of a wider, more distributed transport system. And as we progress towards the end of the roadmap, that mobility as a service really does form part of that day-to-day life because of the increased trust the public has. So that's a very brief summary of some of the threads of the roadmap. Again, as I said, all of that detail is available now through the Future Flight Centre Challenge website with all of this detail in there. I'm going to hand back to Chris now, who's just going to briefly mention about how this relates to the Phase 3 challenge.
Thanks, Ian. So what we did was pull out that subsection, the demonstration section, where the Future Flight Challenge sits, so between now and 2024, and we set out what's the vision, a detailed vision for all of those roadmap areas for 2024. And some of these include, for example, I'll just choose one, vertiports. By 2024, we need to have initial vertiports deployed operationally and available to use for operations, for example. And then we highlighted, move to the next slide, please. Can we move to the next slide, please? Thanks. And then we highlighted what are some of the key demonstrations that we need to have by 2024 and that we will be asking the Future Flight Challenge Phase 3 stakeholders to deliver. And one example of this, I'll just choose the first one, is demonstrating multi-operator interoperability of UTM, for example, showing strategic deconfliction between drone operations of different UTM providers within the same airspace. Now, we've listed in detail key demonstration scenarios that we would be looking for. So that's how this wider roadmap connects to the 2024 vision and ambition for the Future Flight Challenge and for the next phase of the Future Flight Challenge. So I'll wrap up there, conscious of time.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Carissa and Ian, for that insightful view of the roadmap and the vision moving forward. I hope that has encouraged everyone to get involved with the phase 3 competition, and we're now going to open up for a panel discussion before finalising with a Q&A. So I welcome all our speakers and new panellists back to the floor. As I mentioned, we have Fern, who is our new Social Science Research Director for the Future Flight Challenge, Richard, CEO at Altitude Angel, and Eduardo, CCO at Vertical Aerospace, joining us for this discussion. So thank you very much all. I'm going to pose our first question to Carissa. How do you see the Future Flight Roadmap being used to deliver future flight in the UK?
So the Future Flight Roadmap is a tool for all stakeholders in the future flight ecosystem. We understand that this ecosystem continues to expand with new and diverse players, and it is an ascent market after all. And as the Future Flight Challenge started to bring together these diverse players, convening stakeholders across multiple sectors beyond traditional aerospace and aviation, we recognized that there was a need to make sure that we're not operating in silos. Basically, we wanted to align all of our ambitions and initiatives and have a coordinated strategic approach. So what we did was set out this roadmap to inform our stakeholders, for it to be a collective vision and ambition, and to be a tool for all of the stakeholders. We set out to understand the ecosystem, the key players, the roles, the interdependencies, and we mapped out the principal milestones, policy, legislative, technological, societal, etc., and highlighted the critical waypoints to get us from where we are to achieving that 2030 vision. So it really highlights the role of the different players in the ecosystem and the time frame and milestones that we need to achieve in order to achieve this collective vision. So for us, it's a decision-making tool for investments, legislation, policies, for government, for businesses, for consumers, for all the players within this future aviation ecosystem.
Thank you. And also a decision-making tool for phase 3, I would imagine. How do you think it can be used to support projects moving forward?
Absolutely. So like we've said, we've pulled out that subsection of demonstration for 2024. We've deep dived and gone into detail of what is the vision for 2024 and what are the example scenarios, what are the key demonstrations. So this is really to guide and guide our stakeholders onto the right path, to make sure that it's a coordinated approach, and also to help them understand where collaboration needs to take place. So if you have development in one area, understanding what's coming next, what are the different milestones that's after 2024 that sets them up to put us all on the right path. So it's having that coordinated approach for everyone involved in this ecosystem to achieve this collective vision for the UK.
Fantastic, thank you, Carissa. And we'll touch on how you can get involved with that consortia building and activities towards phase 3 in a bit. So the next question, I'm going to bring in Richard. Richard, thank you for joining us. Where do you see Altitude Angel playing a key role in this future flight roadmap?
Brilliant. Thank you for having me. And that's a great question. I think definitely from Altitude Angel's point of view, it's about enablement and about demonstration. So in the vision for 2030, we talked about things like predictability, unification, the need for dynamic management, inclusivity, distributed systems harmonization, equity, safety, to name a few. And I think it's fair to say UTM is these things, and UTM is really the bedrock of these things. And that's really the case regardless of use case or the user. So it's about our role helping to unlock this future mobility scene, certainly across the consortia. I think one of the things that helps to differentiate us in the market as well is that we've got a real heritage of really not just talking about the future, but actually bringing collaborators together, certainly around a defined vision, and then actually going out there, building it and then doing it. And I think that, certainly Future Flight has been instrumental really in taking ideas from concept all the way through those stages of development. And then ultimately now we're moving to those areas of actually real change. So I think, from our perspective, again, UTM really is that invisible layer that's going to enable the UK to achieve its future flight vision. And we're really, really excited to be a part of that. And I think, when it comes to phase 3, we're already working with potential consortium partners. And I do think we'll also be putting forward a proposal to lead one. So really, really exciting future ahead. The vision is all about bringing together all of these collaborators, supporting exciting new use cases in the airspace, being fair and equitable. And these are really things that are very close to our DNA here at Altitude Angel. We're really looking forward to unlocking that here.
Great. And you mentioned kind of phase 3 and where you're moving. How do you see UTM evolving, not just within phase 3, but towards 2030 as well?
Again, another awesome question. So again, the technology of UTM, I think even today, where it's fairly nascent, has really shown itself to be perhaps the most adaptable and readily available and accessible aspect of our entire aviation ecosystem. And I don't see that changing. But coming back to that enablement piece, it's more about acknowledging that UTM isn't about being one product or one service, right? It's a portfolio of capabilities offered by and available to many. So really, UTM's role as it unfolds in future flight is understanding and enhancing all of those planned operations for all airspace users as we go forwards in the immediate future, but as well as that 2030 timeframe. So I think we'll also see that as the phase 3 program unfolds, UTM's role will really start to come into its own in being that connecting, that sort of fabric layer between emerging smart cities, automated ground transportation, vertiports, all of these things ultimately being incorporated and accelerated by the presence of a UTM. So I think you'll really start to see over that time frame, UTM start to enter those mainstream aviation networks and systems. And then also even the management of the airspace really start to deploy those enhanced capabilities, which is ultimately, taking place against some very traditional systems today. So change, I think, is one of the big factors that you'll see, but it's ultimately there to accelerate.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think I speak for everyone on the call when I say we're excited to see what comes within phase 3 and also beyond. Brilliant. So we have some people already posing questions about social license. So I'm going to bring Fern in for the next question. Fern, what role do you see publics play in achieving the milestones set out in the roadmap for future flight?
Thank you, Hannah. That's a really important question, obviously. Publics are going to be vital. They're going to be key to realising this vision. And obviously, rightly, consumers form a sort of pivotal part of this roadmap. But I just want to sort of issue a word of caution there. We need to be careful not just to view publics as consumers or users. We need to think about broader publics in the wider sense. We also need to remember that publics are very diverse, and in reality, we're actually also all members of the public. To each other, we're all members of the public as well. And we're all subject to similar social and cultural influences, narratives, and concerns. So in reality, when we talk about publics, we're actually talking about a sort of very complex web of different communities, users and non-users, and also wider stakeholders who are going to be key to this vision as well. So that could include people who make or implement policy at a local, regional or national level. It could include regulators or potential investors or employees in relevant organisations or educators and so on and so forth. So to move forward, it's really vital that we build a sort of much clearer picture of the sort of complex social factors that will impact on a variety of publics, not just in the sense of sort of their trust, but also thinking about awareness and behaviours. And this will ultimately give us a more comprehensive picture of what we might think of as a sort of social desirability or social licence in relation to future flight. And it's really key, I'll just iterate again, that we need to include perspective from users and non-users alike here. After all, this isn't really just a question about how we as a society want to travel in the future. This sort of links into, because it crosses so many different areas and impacts on so many different parts of our lives, it crosses into a much bigger question about how we as a society want to live our lives in the future. So I think it's really important to understand what's driving those public narratives, perceptions, attitudes, etc.
Brilliant, thank you. And you talk about that broader public piece. The roadmap highlights a role of diverse stakeholders in an emerging system to deliver the future flight in the UK. And it highlights the different need of organisations to work together and achieve the milestones that we've set out in the roadmap. What understanding do we need for the future flight landscape to mitigate any risks in achieving this?
Again, a really, really important question as well. We can't think of, as I said, we're all members of the public. We can't think of the sort of innovation ecosystem and publics as two separate systems that aren't interacting. So in order to take a sort of a broader sort of whole systems approach to understanding how we sort of realise this vision for future flight, we do need to sort of think about sort of similar issues in relation to sort of organisational trust, awareness and behaviours. It will be really helpful to sort of build a more comprehensive picture of the wider range of organisations and agendas and aspirations that those organisations have within this sort of very dynamic and, to be honest, fairly fluid ecosystem, because obviously it's an emergent sort of innovation ecosystem itself. Key to this is going to be mapping sort of who's already there, but also importantly, who's not there, who's not on board yet, who do we need, who are the key players that we need in the coming years, and obviously towards that 2024 vision. We need to build a much stronger understanding of the sort of dynamics of the intra and inter relationships between these organisations, both those who are involved and those who are desirous to be involved or necessary to be involved moving downstream. And we really need to sort of, as part of that, sort of start to map and think about the values and knowledge flow through that innovation ecosystem. So it's not just about the dynamics of individual relationships within organisations or between organisations or sort of chains of organisations. It's thinking about what's sort of driving that, where knowledge is being shared as well. So that's quite an important sort of social science sort of piece of work that needs to be done. This also said, this really does link back to some of the work that we need to do with communities and publics, as different stakeholders will have very different concerns or perspectives about what those publics might think or need. So it's really important to match those two pieces of work together. So as I said, this is part of a much bigger sort of whole systems approach that we need to take to understanding the sort of dynamics of publics in relation to innovation ecosystem.
Brilliant, thank you, Fern. And we've got the session next month on public perception, which Fern will be leading. So if you want to hear any more about the work, then please join us for the next month's Future Flight Friday. I'm interested there, Fern has mentioned different players, some that are already here, some that aren't. Vertical Aerospace are obviously very much a player who are here and now. So Eduardo, by 2030, we see mobility as a service forming part of day-to-day life with on-demand advanced air mobility services. What are the types of developments that will help us reach this milestone? And what are some of the barriers that you think we have to overcome?
Thanks for that question. And, if I may, I think the timeline for Future Flight Wave 3 is great, and allowing for that demonstration in 2024 is going to pave the way to that. Our ambition is to start delivering those services as of 2025, once the aircraft will be certified and we make them available to our customers. I think Richard has mentioned something that is very fundamental, which is the word enablement. The operation of these planes, if we really want to achieve this vision, we really need to work on enablers first. And that development needs to be done in parallel. So I personally believe that we are working very hard on maturing our plane, industrializing it and certifying it. But equally important is the infrastructure development and the airspace development. Because without those enablers, even if we have a very nice and ready aircraft, they will not be able to operate. I believe as well, and you mentioned, in your presentation, how can the UK use advanced air mobility as a flagship for its industry, technology, society? I think we really need to act together in the upcoming 3 years. I think Future of Flight is a fantastic vehicle for that. And you mentioned as well the competition. Internationally, developments are out there. Governments are also supporting those initiatives, in those different regions. And we should not forget as well that for us, advanced air mobility will have two primary objectives. The first one will be to improve the life of the people in the UK, to offer solutions and mobility options that will bring value. But at the same time, you mentioned the growth in GDP, the creation of jobs, and of course, the export. And this is a word that for us as manufacturers is very important. We have already pre-orders of this vehicle in different regions of the world. And we would like to show first that it works in our own homeland. Bring that value to the UK, show it, not just for the people in the UK, but also to make a window to the outside world. So I think it might sound a bit strange, but for me, the key is going to be on how do we support those enabling functions? How do we support funding for that infrastructure? How do we support the development of that airspace, UTM services, etc., so that we make sure that we are all ready. So those people need to be supported, and I think Wave 3 is a great opportunity to do that.
Fantastic, thank you. So you've mentioned enablers there, and whilst you skimmed over it, certification is a key one, I would imagine, for you. What do you see as the critical path to regulatory approval for new classes of air vehicles?
I think, as I've been somehow, and I'm voicing over the need for support for all these players that are bringing those enablers, I would like to make the same call for CAA. I think CAA is doing a great job to try to support all these upcoming innovation technologies, etc. I think at some stage somebody should also ask, for funding, scaling, resources. I think the regulators need to be equipped if we really want to make this happen. And usually, the creation of regulation is not considered as a direct economical improvement impact when you do that. But in this current period, I would say that is one factor. How equipped is CAA? What type of resources are made available to them to support all these efforts? I think that is going to be one of the critical factors. And the other one, if we really want to be leaders over the world, I think they will also need to do a great job in discussing with other regulators across the world, be it EASA, be it FAA, JCAB in Japan, and others, which will also require a lot of work for them. So if I may, I would like, Future Flight to help support resourcing, funding, equipping, all those actors that are really important to make this happen, being it the ones that are developing enablers, being it the regulators. Yeah.
Hannah, if I can just come in on that. And it's why we wanted to develop this wider roadmap that is not just focused on where the Future Flight Challenge sits. It's not just focused on stakeholders achieving something by 2024. It's setting out what needs to come after that, because we need to act now in order to achieve those longer term ambitions. What we were looking at for 2026, what are we looking at for 2028, what we're looking at for 2030, industrialization, scaling up, service base. These things need to be put in place now. We need to act now. So we're highlighting who are the players, who are the people that need to act now. What is the role? What are the different roles of the players in the ecosystem that need to be acting now in order to set us up for after 2024? We need to make sure that we're driving continued investment beyond this hype curve, beyond 2024, in order to deliver this. So it's why we've set out something that is wider than just 2024.
Thank you, Carissa and Eduardo there. So in the interest of time, I'm going to start bringing in some Q&A questions, and amongst the panelist questions, I'd like to let any attendees on the call know that any questions that haven't been picked up during this session, we'll be putting a Q&A document together, and we'll get those picked up offline for you. But Ian, I'm going to pose this one to you, and possibly Carissa, you can come in if you feel. How is the Future Flight Roadmap considering the affordability of aspects of such technologies that you've outlined here?
Yeah, that's a really important question. And I appreciate we didn't really sort of address it directly in the presentation, but as you can imagine, it's definitely at the heart of what we are doing, and it's picked up through different areas. And by affordability, I'm taking this as sort of consumer affordability. So making sure services are available to use for consumers that need to use these services. And that is really the key part of that accessibility for us, is that everybody can access these services, that the services are being developed in a way that makes them affordable. The scaling is there to support that, which is why we've highlighted that as a key area in the roadmap, that the scaling occurs and works in a way that allows services to come down in price to enable people to access them. Initially, as you'd expect with a lot of these leading edge services, the affordability is not going to be there initially, but it will be over time. And that's where, again, we're trying to, as Carissa said, we try to set out these milestones in the roadmap to make sure we get to a place where, certainly by towards the end of the roadmap, the services are accessible and available through being affordable.
Great, thank you. Carissa, do you have anything to add, or has Ian wrapped all of that up for you?
You wrapped that up perfectly. We've set out that it needs to be affordable. So industry needs to act to get us there.
Brilliant, thank you both. And while we're kind of on the topic of the roadmap, we have a question here about vertiports, which have obviously been outlined within it. How are you encouraging alternate vertiport designs to ensure aircraft agnostic stations when standards are yet to be determined by global agencies?
I'll pick up quickly, and Chris can definitely add to this as well. That's absolutely, again, part of why we're doing the roadmap, is to make sure that we're addressing things like interoperability and standards early enough in the roadmap. Now, I appreciate the industry is moving at pace to develop and install things like vertiports already, but what we're trying to put in place now is some actions with appropriate groups, such as new working groups that we're looking to fund and initiate, to start to really drive home things like standards and interoperability for infrastructure, but wider as well, for across a lot of the infrastructure and the air vehicles as well. So that is definitely a key part of that roadmap, and one of the key reasons we're doing this now.
Mm-hmm. And when we started deep diving into standards and interoperability, we discussed, do we want to lead in this area? And we had some discussions with the DFT, and when we set out the roadmap and we set the ambition, we said, well, we need to be aligned, because if you lead, you can be out of alignment and not interoperable with other standards that are being developed outside of the UK, for example. So this is why we set out it needs to be globally interoperable. So we've set the ambition and the vision for that. So yeah, that's what I would say in terms of that. But as Ian highlighted, the next steps for this roadmap, this is a live document, it's going to evolve. And now we're taking this and we're going even further. So now we're considering, well, who takes ownership of these different actions? What are the actions? We laid out more than 100 actions. We've got a long list of actions out of this roadmap in order to achieve these milestones. What are all of the actions? Who takes ownership? Who are the players? Who are the stakeholders? And what comes next? So we're developing and setting out what are the recommendations to get us there. So that would be the work that would come after this roadmap.
Fantastic, and that's actually answered one of our next questions. But do you have a time frame for that next piece of work? What's kind of your vision for that publication?
So we're going to take what we're calling a natural break, where we're sharing this thought leadership piece. We want stakeholders to digest it, and we will be updating this, taking into account the outputs that we'll see from the phase 2 projects that the Future Flight Challenge has been running, and then also take into account what the phase 3 projects are bringing to the table. And then we'll be updating this document. So we'll be looking to do that end of this year and beginning of next year.
Brilliant, thank you. And final question in the interest of time, but as we start thinking about phase 3, I know that we'll have new entrants on the call. What are the opportunities for them? Are we encouraging new applications from consortia that aren't already formed? What's your vision for the projects moving forward?
Absolutely. So we have phase 2 projects who have set out already thinking of what they're doing for phase 3, but we are inviting, this is an emerging industry. It's an ascent market, so we are encouraging participants to apply who were not involved in phase 2 as well. Why we set out this vision is also so stakeholders can see, well, hang on, what's been happening in phase 2? What needs to happen, and what can we bring to the table? So we'll be encouraging participants and stakeholders to apply who were not part of phase 2.
Brilliant, thank you. And thank you to all our speakers and panelists today. I think that's been a valuable discussion for everyone that's joined today. I'm unfortunately going to have to wrap up the discussion there as we're meant to close at 1 o'clock. But before we finish, I'd like to outline some opportunities in a couple of slides for delegates and attendees to take a look at offline. So if I can flip to the next slide, thank you. So we do have our recently launched landscape map. This is a tool that is online on KTN's website and outlines hundreds of organisations that are involved with the Future Flight Challenge. It's a fantastic tool to support your consortia building in phase 3. And so I encourage you to take a look at that, register your organisation and your capability. And if there's anyone in particular that you would like any introductions to support your phase 3 applications, then please do reach out to the KTN team. Secondly, we have our Future Flight Showcase. Now, the deadline for submission, as you will see at the bottom, is today at 6 o'clock. But if you have a desperate need to submit a video, I'm sure that we can fit you in somewhere if you aren't able to meet that deadline. This showcase enables you to pitch a 2-minute presentation on your organization's capabilities. Maybe you're a phase 2 project and you want to outline what you've done already, or maybe you're an organization that aren't currently involved and want to showcase your expertise. The platform is open for all. And it will be open throughout phase 3 to enable that collaboration and consortia building. So please do take a look and don't worry too much about the deadline. I'm so sure we can sort that out for you. And then moving on to our events coming up next, we have our Future Flight Cafe series. So the next one will be from phase 2 project Skybus on the 3rd of September. These are informal networking opportunities to network. And it's a rare opportunity at the moment to be able to come off mute and pose those questions directly to speakers and panelists. So that's what that session's for. And then finally, to close the session off, I'm sure everyone on the call is interested about phase 3, otherwise we wouldn't be here today. The briefing event is on the 14th of September, 2 till 3:30, and we will make sure that that registration link is circulated with you or for you in the post-meeting materials that are sent out by our events team. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Our contact details are now on the screen. Please, please, please join our Future Flight LinkedIn group. You can also follow us on Twitter to keep updated on any news that is coming out. And if you have any queries, technical or otherwise, the information is there for you on screen. So thank you very much for joining. Thank you for all our panelists for sharing your expertise. And with that, I will close the session. Thank you.
The world is shaping up for a revolution in aviation innovation. In the UK, businesses are already creating new, innovative, greener air transport solutions designed to offer more choice and reduce our carbon footprint. The Future Flight Challenge from UK Research and Innovation aims to create the aviation system of the future, allowing us to improve transport links between regions and in remote areas to connect people to education, jobs and healthcare. Our £125 million investment will allow the UK to build, use and export new transport technologies and be at the forefront of aviation innovation. We're bringing together industry experts to carry out research, development and demonstrations to solve mobility challenges in the UK. By encouraging innovators from a wide variety of sectors to work together, the projects we fund will help shape novel aviation approaches to enable the safe operation of radically new aircraft. Using drones to offer alternative ways of delivering goods and services, both in highly populated and remote areas. Carrying out offshore maintenance and surveillance for the renewable energy sector. The delivery of medical supplies. surveying buildings after a fire or collapse to reduce the risk to human life, or post-incident filming for evidence gathering. Using new and sustainable fuel sources to lower carbon emissions from advanced air mobility vehicles and electric or hybrid aircraft to help address the mobility and congestion problems in urban areas, and improve travel connections for rural communities where the development of ground infrastructure is difficult. These new modes of air transport will combine in a coordinated airspace where scheduled and on-demand flights work together to move people, goods, and services. To enable widespread safe use of autonomous and electric air vehicles, Future Flight will bring together advanced technologies with control and regulation, physical and digital infrastructure systems, and new operating models. This new environment will be a catalyst for businesses to invest in the UK as we shape the global future of aviation and create a truly integrated aviation system. With a truly all-inclusive approach, Future Flight is transformational and will change our lives.